Welcome everyone to Spirit Coffee Talk. I'm Ginette and with me is Elyse Richmond and Elyse Catherine. We are the mediums and channelers of Avalon Spirit. And every week we connect and talk about what's current, what's going on, spirit messages, insights about mediumship, channeling, ascension, growth, you name it. And today when we were chatting before, we really noticed a theme and a really common big theme that seems to be coming up for a lot of people, our clients, people we talk to, as well as ourselves, is these jumping timelines right now. There are timelines that we don't quite know the reason why, and maybe we'll find out today in our episode if we tune in, but like why there are so many timelines at play. And what's cool is that many people are consciously noticing the glitch, if you wanted to call it a glitch, or the changes in timelines or the different memories of an event that are altered from one person to another. So I'm curious if that's happening for all of you in your world today. And that is what we're talking about. So welcome, ladies.
Welcome. I just had a timeline glitch. I jumped because there's people washing the windows, and this, like, just as he started talking, this like big brush hit the window and it was like whack, right? It's like so he saw me jump. That was why I was like, oh my gosh.
I could see something in your window reflection, and you're like,
yeah, oh, it scared me.
I'm like,
anyways,
what is that?
I knew they were around, but of course it's like right when we start talking, they're like, hey, here we are.
Yep. Absolutely.
We'll take that as the universe saying correct topic today, ladies.
Yes.
Solidify this timeline right now.
Yes.
My heart rate to come down in a moment.
So I have a little timeline story just to kind of set the stage. Yesterday, actually, I was talking with my daughter, and we've talked about my dog. I've talked about my dog, Maddie, and one of her friends also has a dog from the same litter. And we met their dog a couple months ago at my son's birthday. And at that time we were like, we're going to get the dogs together to meet, because we were in the parking lot waiting for all the parents to pick up the kids. My daughter had brought a friend, and this person's friend's parents came, and out pops this beautiful dog that looked like our dog. It's like, oh, and like similar mannerisms. And we talked about it and realized same litter, right? So really cool. So we're like, we're going to get the dogs together. And while we were talking about this, their dog was running around the parking lot. Ours was at home, and he was just so cute. And so we have made plans that on this weekend, we're going to get the dogs together and like reconnect brother and sister, right? And so I was telling my daughter, and she was like, no, Maddie already met the other dog. Maddie met her brother already. And I was like, no, she didn't. She's like, yeah, Dad went home and got Maddie, and then they played in the parking lot. I was like, no, that was one dog, because Dad never went home. And she was so certain, like she's got this like stellar memory, very accurate. She's got these amazing little ears that hears everything and can repeat everything in detail, right? She's just like a hawk. So
Noted.
yeah. And she was like, no, even my friend remembers this. Like we talked about it, and Dad went home, got Maddie, brought her back, and they played in the parking lot. And I was like, no, that didn't happen. But I said, I think you're noticing timeline jumping. So we got home and of course asked Trevor, like, what happened at Easton's birthday? And he's like, oh yeah, no, we saw the other dog there. And she's like, but you went home and got Maddie. And he's like, no, I didn't. And so her vivid, very real memory is of the altered experience. It's not just like she got the wrong name of the dog or like something small, like she has a completely alternate experience of the same thing. And I can feel from her when she's speaking how real it is. And so I thought it was such a beautiful example of how these like altering timeline experiences are happening for people, whether it be in your memory or in like real time. You're noticing the glitch, if we want to call it that, in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you noticed? Either of you?
I've had some massive experiences with this lately. So how I came to understand mine is that, so little things during the day, like I'll see, like, for instance, I said this example, but I was sitting outside enjoying my morning coffee, and it was like beautiful. My dogs were outside and they were laying with me. I wasn't laying. I was sitting on the deck. Dogs were laying. And it was kind of a little routine. And then I was like, okay, I need to go in and get ready or whatever. So I picked up my coffee, went inside. Dogs are outside playing or whatever. And then I'm like messing around. And then all of a sudden I look down and the dogs are both laying on the carpet, like fast asleep in the living room. And I'm like, and I looked to see if the back, because the amount of time that it would have taken them to like get the door open by themselves, then come in, and like my dogs are big, and like through this little place, like there's no chance that I wouldn't have seen it, right? And then proceed to go lay down and get into a comfortable position and then fall fast asleep. Like the time couldn't have matched that. So it was like, in one timeline I was outside having coffee, and in one time with the dogs, and in one time I was inside having coffee with the dogs. And so like just that little kind of glitch where it was like a choice I made one way or the other, and the dogs like jumped a timeline. And then one was really massive. It was, and this threw me through a loop, I'll tell you. Sometimes timeline jumping can really F you up, because it happened to me when the real time of like my current timeline existence, in which I'm choosing to like focus my attention, was I was sleeping. So it was like a regular 8-hour period. But in the alternate timeline, it happened over a couple days, and I was like there. And it wasn't a dream, because I know I can feel the difference between when it's a dream, when it's like an astral traveling, or when I'm going into a past life, or like I've worked along this. If I go to like a light council, or and I travel around, this was me in an alternate timeline, because I remember I was hitting my husband and I was pushing on his chest because he did something very bad in the dream, in the like timeline. And I was like, this time I know it's not a dream, because I can feel you, and I can feel all the pain. I could feel the pain, and I'm like, this is real. Like, damn it. And I cried, and I was in the moment. I could see, it was like the minutes were passing. It was a day, and then another day. And he made me, it was so sad. It was so sad for me. And then when I woke up, he actually woke me up to say goodbye. He was leaving for work. And I was like, and I couldn't, I was like, don't leave, like, don't leave. I need to talk about this. And he left. And then I got up, and my guides were so helpful. And they're like, first it rattled me all day. And then once I could get my balance back, and they said, we had to take you into an alternate timeline so that you could do your healing around this without having to actually experience it within your highest timeline frequency. Because we need you to do this work, this light work, but you're holding on to a frequency that doesn't align in this timeline. So we had to bring you into that timeline so that you could do some healing around it and forgiveness, and so that you don't need to carry this fear with you. So I had this like, this fear, because of my experiences in life of like infidelity and like that hurt. I experienced it in my alternate timeline so that I could do some healing and work. And my husband is like so good with like hearing this and understanding where I'm coming from, so we could do some work, some love and heart work together, so that frequency no longer can infiltrate on my current frequency timeline. Like, isn't that wild?
Yeah. Impactful, intense, but the consciousness of it is really interesting.
It took me a bit.
Yeah. How about you, Elyse?
Yeah, I've been having it, kind of the same things where it's like, wait, I definitely did that thing, or wait, I definitely spoke to that person and I didn't, or so a lot of those pieces. For me, I think what's kind of smacking me in the face the most, as far as like kind of the healing growth experience aspect of it, is I'm noticing that I almost feel like in different areas of life, I'm in different timelines. So it kind of feels like this pulling apart, which a lot of the work that I do, I really try to embody and like come into myself and use that as my like true north, especially when things feel chaotic externally, right? The space that I'm living in right now, there's a lot happening.
I feel like is like, where it's like you, but multiple pieces pulling apart.
Yeah. I got one eyeball over here. I got another eyeball over here. One limb is in another world. And so, for me, like I was saying, I always try to like reintegrate and like use my own body and intuition and that space to kind of navigate what to do next or where I'm going or what's happening. But because I've been feeling like I've been pulled in so many different directions, I'm finding it really disorienting, and it's making it
Definitely.
in those moments, especially because I'm like, wait, this piece is so aligned over here and this is working really well. And I wasn't even necessarily focusing on that as part of my like highest timeline. But yet this part over here that I have been focusing on is all of a sudden like, and everything's kind of all over the place.
Right.
And so then, you know, for me, and I know I've talked about this a lot, like my brain is it likes to plan, it likes to analyze, it likes to like know what's going on. It's a trauma, nervous system, you know, a whole bunch of things around that I do a lot of work on. But my brain always is like, okay, but this and then this and then this and what's next and da da da. And that's, like I was saying, why I always try to come into my body, because I know my brain can be really active and really have a lot to say about things. And what I'm noticing is that's creating this disorientation that then my brain really tries to latch onto and really tries to be like, see, that's not going to work out. See, fear, see, da 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 da. And it's that constant, and sometimes it's happening like multiple times a day. And so, and then other days it's like, everything feels aligned and la 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 la, and everything is good. And then the next day I'm like, where am I? Because literally one eyeball's looking one direction and one is looking the other, and you feel kind of that sensation of loss or disorientation. And so for me, it's like when I'm noticing that, pausing, and Lisa, like you were saying, coming back to, I mean, some sort of self-nurturing to support yourself and feeling really unsteady. Because I think a lot of times our default is like, okay, spirit, what's going on? I'm panicked. But they don't talk to me when I'm like that. They're like, you can figure yourself out and then we'll have a conversation with you. Usually if I don't figure myself out, I'll have a little temper tantrum with them. And then they're like, okay, here's a piece. Now go figure yourself out and we'll give you the rest later. And then I can kind of reorient. But yeah, it's just this supporting myself. Okay, I'm feeling really stressed. I'm worried. Or excited. And this is great. And like being really present with what I'm experiencing, working with that in whatever way I need to. And then being like, okay, now what is the truth? Where am I? And what timeline am I in?
Because what is the truth in this particular timeline? Like in the timeline I'm in, what is the truth? Because that varies, right? Especially when you're experiencing multiple timelines in moments. In a day.
And what is the truth of
through, 5, 6 different timelines? And that can be really unearthing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And then what is the truth of the timeline that you're wanting? Like that, because like you were saying, we're always trying to reorient, or ideally we are trying to reorient, like, what is it that I want? Right. Ginette, you've talked at length this year about like spirit saying, what do you want? Ask for what you want, ask for it. It's probably why, right?
You want?
Because if we're not continually asking ourselves that question, I feel like it would be very easy to get lost in all of the timelines and all of the potentials and all of the things that are happening at any given moment.
That is the key piece. And I have to say, because while you're talking,
they're talking to me like crazy.
Oh my God. So I, when your face feels like it's melting sideways, I have these guides, and this particular one that's really come in this year is galactic, like very, very high frequency, different frequency than before. He's been watching me for years in a non-creepy way, but now communicates. But when he communicates, it's so powerful that I feel like my whole face and reality warps for a minute. So I'm listening to you and I'm like, where is my face? Okay, that's what it feels like. Anyways, here's the cool thing. Because when we started this, and even when we were talking before, Lisa, you were like, why is this happening? I'm like, I don't know. And I've been wondering that too. But here's the cool thing is he just gave me the understanding, which has to do with choice and asking for what you want. So when you were talking, Elyse, he pulled me out in view, and he says, what's happening is those that are noticing the glitches are being given the macro view of their experience incarnated. They've been given the macro view. We are so used to living the micro view, or like the nano view. A lot of people live in a nano view, which is singular only. Now, a lot of people are starting to expand into the micro view, which is maybe one timeline or two, right? Like Bree's example would be an example of the micro view, not just the nano view of nothing beyond 3D reality. So what he did is he pulled me into the macro view, And the higher we go in our ascension, the more we open our consciousness, the more we can recognize these things, like many of you watching can. You actually get to see the image of all the parts of you. You actually get to see this. And the reason why they keep saying, ask for what you want, ask for what you want, ask for what you want, is because you get to choose which timeline you want, but you need to see them. You need to know them to be able to pick them.
Yes.
So what happens is we have to catch ourselves, which is not easy in those moments, like Lisa, like you said, the dream, for example, and not spin it into fear and get lost into fear and create it into your reality. Rather be like, oh, this is not what I want, but this is what I want.
This
Like
is a healing opportunity. Yeah.
You're seeing the whole map instead of one section.
Totally. And sometimes you're brought into certain frequencies, at least on a daily basis, when you're moving in and out, depending on where you are, like what situation you're in, because that situation might require you to be in a different frequency, or what you need to learn from it or experience through it requires it in a certain timeline that isn't the same timeline as the next thing that you're working with. If you're working with clients versus house hunting, whether you're, and so we can flip around in our timelines based upon the frequency in which we reside in those timelines to do what we need to do in that certain situation. And when the timelines are like, I think we talked about this once, like a year and a half ago, like hair floating through, and it kind of like it's not like this layered thing. It's like, okay, timeline. They're like the quantum, field of it is intertwined, right? And so where you focus your attention in it is like where you take one of infinite amount of opportunities, let's say, to focus in. That's where you're giving your attention. That's your current timeline. So if we're constantly wanting to be in our highest frequency timeline, they're going to say, okay, and we give our focused attention on it, but there's an aspect of self that doesn't align with that frequency. It can't match that frequency like a radio station. Therefore, we have to intertwine into that timeline in order to either clear, heal, or maintain what you need to in order to do that and have that experience. And if that experience isn't something that you want to have in your timeline at all or focus, it's like we're moving into the macro and then recentering your focus. Like all of a sudden when you get caught, I found myself getting caught up in all these if ands, and like I was like creating a reality with this bad boy. And I was like, hold on, whoa, that's not a frequency. That is not a timeline that I even want to even dabble in. F that. I'm out, and then it's almost like you can recalibrate. So that's literally no longer in alignment or part of your timeline at all. Where like conversations that you had in there, nobody can remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And this is becoming way more open. Like when we're talking about it, I would imagine there's probably some people who this might be the first time they've heard or like really conceptualized the concept of like timeline jumping, right? Or it's like, that doesn't sound like something I even understand, which is totally fair because we're going to experience it in our own way. Or people might be like, that's what that is, which I would imagine there's a bunch of people being like, holy smokes. What was the point of what I was going to say?
Your point is in another timeline right now.
Totally. I was like, that thought.
There it is.
Gone.
She gone.
In real time.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
anyway, the whole timeline jumping thing, I think, it's becoming more and more like talked about. People are starting to, like, if I see videos and stuff of people, you guys, I have to share this story. And if anybody knows who this girl is, I saw her on TikTok. She's a Canadian. I have to share her story because it's been sitting in my heart. So I'm acknowledging this is not my story. I'm not stealing it. This is a woman that I saw on TikTok. I don't know her name. She went to sleep at 21 years old, woke up in a dream, and she was like, am I dreaming? And then again, she was like, no, I'm not dreaming. And then she looked down when she was pregnant. So she's like, I must be dreaming because I'm pregnant. And then she ended up experiencing her entire pregnancy, giving birth, And she said she felt absolutely everything. And it was like she went to bed and woke up, and day by day, and she was like, I'm obviously not in a dream. That's weird. And lived for 40 years. She raised her son. She like lived her whole, like 40 straight years with every emotion and feeling that you and I have in our lifetime. And then on her son's 40th birthday, she woke up 6 hours later that she went to sleep the first time in a 21-year-old body. She said she went through like the worst depression. She was in bed sobbing for days. She had she longed for her life, her life. She said, I spent 40 years in a life, and I came back to my old life, and I'm like, here I am. And so now she's starting to express these things. And I'm like, okay, a couple of years ago, that wouldn't be something that would our like kind of collective macro timeline wouldn't allow that to even be experienced or shared in a realm of this reality. But the fact that she's able to share this with people now, and people are starting to, and then in the comments, people are like, I did that, but not for 40 years. Like, I spent a summer somewhere else, and then I woke up and I longed to be back there. And people have gone in different, like, either past lives, but literally alternate realities and timelines. And so it is a thing. If anybody's curious, go look at some stories, and it's pretty wild. But my guides are saying it was very purposeful in the timing of when this reality shift in our ability, in our frequency to be able to experience this. It was very purposeful in when it was like allowed, because on a collective level, we had to get to a certain frequency collectively in order to have the veil thin enough to experience this quantum level experience.
Hey, and that's exactly what they were saying, because they were saying while you were talking before, they said, don't confuse this with the bigger collective timeline shifts we've talked about, where we're like, we've shifted and we're like locked in, or like big timeline shift. They're like, those are collective shifts. But now what's happening because of those are individual personal macro shifts or macro views, right? Like it's not all one and the same. There's different happenings. So I like that you brought that up, because that resonates and makes a lot of sense with what they're saying.
And to also remember that you can, within collective, still experience your own timeline, right? Like,
of course, that's the
because
whole point.
you know, that's been something for me, even from a timeline perspective, is I'm like, there's some collective timelines where I'm at that I'm like not super interested in being a part of, and so I'm gonna choose to be kind of out, you know, experiencing that in a very different way. So also to say, understanding that like collective doesn't necessarily have to dictate your experience, and you can, it's so infinite. And I think I get a little frustrated, because I think it creates a lot of fear for people when I've seen a lot of TikTok creators, because there's just so much out there, right? And we've talked about this before, having to choose what resonates with you. I love this conversation because we're talking so much about like our own ability to choose what that looks like. And I've heard a lot of language around like, this thing is coming, this experience is coming. And I'm like, but that's speaking in a very literal, linear manner to something that is not in any way, shape, or form literal or linear. And so, yeah, just to kind of throw that
and
there as well.
That whole like 5D shift, and people staying in the 3D and stuff like that. I've had that coming in for a long time now. But what I've come to know is that it's literally about individual timelines within the macro, right? And so, yes, there's going to be people who are experiencing a significantly different reality. And that's why we're just at the tip of feeling this, because we're just starting to feel this on a way that we're like talking about on a regular basis. We're going to hear more and more people talk about this, and therefore we're going to get more and more comfortable knowing that we are all residing in different timelines. And so your reality can be significantly different than mine, while all living on this earth.
You know, and that's so interesting, because that was exactly what I said to Brie yesterday. It wasn't about saying, I'm right, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong. I was so grounded in being able to say to her, like, that was your memory, and that is okay. but I think that's a different timeline than the one we're in right now, which is why we're going to check with dad, right? So it wasn't about like right or wrong. And you could tell she really
That's
resonated
so
with it.
cool that you did
Mhm.
that. Like, what a cool mama.
Yeah, but it was like such a cool lesson of the validity of this timeline jumping. It's not just me observing it in my reality of like spirit and woo, but like it's manifesting in her reality vividly enough.
And
So
isn't
I
that
love
such a
it.
life lesson, G? Like, I'm glad you bring that forward because that can allow us, honestly, to be like, truthfully, I think we have this memory in a different timeline. I
Yeah.
truly think. And that can be okay. And that can literally like solve a lot of mishap that's going on, that miscommunication between people. And not even like specific memories, but like feelings on things. We're like,
Mhm.
were we in like two completely different places? Like maybe, you know,
Yeah.
like maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't have to essentially take things so personally or the confusion so personally, but
Totally.
rather, and I want to say, I think this is especially true for right now. And right now, meaning in the last couple of years and moving forward, is having that in your pocket as a possibility when there is a disconnect in recall of
Yeah.
something,
I think it's
right?
actually
Like,
just prepping us for it to
yeah,
be getting more and more noticeable that the
yeah,
timelines are very different. They're not
yeah,
going to be so intertwined.
yeah.
It's like literally, it's like I know that person's still alive and they're doing their thing, but we're literally disconnected by completely different timelines. And so like we do not even
Mm-hmm.
coexist in that way.
Yeah.
Which is fair because there's not one better than the other. It's literally just different frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
And so
interesting.
I want to talk about this then quick before we go. When people are experiencing different timeline shifting and all that kind of like alternate reality, and Elyse, you can talk to this too, because you're saying like you've been experiencing this on multiple timelines in a day kind of thing, depending on what you're being faced with. How can we take that and allow ourselves on a human level to be able to just comfort into it so we don't feel so ungrounded and unearthed in it, right? The pendulum swing doesn't have to be so severe when timeline jumping, doing what we need to do in each timeline. Like what have you guys used, or is there any guidance from spirit on how we can embody these timeline jumps and hold on a sec. Okay, they just gave me something big. Talk about something.
Say words. I can't say words anymore.
Shoe.
How can you
Shoes.
embody the timeline shift if you write something down?
Yeah. I think for me, and I mean, I kind of say this all the time, is this the way that my guides always speak to me is come back into yourself, like tend to your human response of whatever it is to
Mm-hmm.
that discrepancy or that feeling, because we talked about how it can be disorienting. Like Lisa, you were talking about how there's so much healing that can come from it. It can feel really sad. It can bring up all this stuff, or it can be like really joyful and exciting. And then all of a sudden you get smacked with another timeline that feels like, oh, that's not in alignment anymore. So for me, it's always coming back to our human experience of it, supporting that emotionally in our body, somatically, however that may be for you, because it's different for everybody. But what they're saying too is that, like, no matter how we're ascending 3D, 5D, whatever D we're in, we're always going to have that human aspect. And the more we tend to it now, the easier it becomes, the more fragmentation within realities there are, because your body and your nervous system and your brain becomes more and more attuned. It was like we were talking about last week, the radio is turning up louder and louder, and your brain's like, oh, I don't know what to do with it. And so it's being able to support yourself, the human responses to the energetics, the timelines, the understandings. The more you can support yourself in that, the easier it will be, the more you'll be able to choose from a really full, whole place of this is what I want my highest timeline to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time goes on, the less you have to do it. Like the embodiment piece is the baseline, because that's what we're here in, right? We're in a 3D meat suit ascending up, but we still got to keep our feet on the ground. We have to keep that grounded nature that comes through our body. right? How do we ground? We pull energy through our bodies. That's like every grounding practice ever, right? Is something to do with bringing energy through us down to Mother Earth. Oh, at 11:11, as you know, Kevin was talking about bringing energy up. Or I think that was what you were saying as well. So I think it comes back to like coming into our bodies, working with what is coming up in whatever way works for you, tending to your human nature. And then you have those skills and it just becomes this more effortless experience as things come up and flow. And the more the volume gets turned up, the less disorienting it is, the less loud your ears adjust, right? To continue on that analogy.
Yeah, it's not like a distortion, but rather you can pick out the different points and enjoy the symphony versus just this like cacophony of sound. Yeah.
What about you?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Lisa's not here anymore.
Lisa's still gone.
Bye.
Sorry, I'm writing it down.
Oh, that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I feel very excited and also really grateful for this awareness of the timelines, even though it can be a little confronting at first or glitchy or whatever. But what this means is it's a physical manifestation of this macro view. So for anyone that's experiencing it, you're literally experiencing the vastness of what you are. You're getting to see it now. You're getting to experience this higher consciousness in real time, depending which timeline. So I think one of the things that we could really do for the next while is when these things happen that throw us for a loop is to try and view it without fear, but rather with curiosity and be like, ooh, oh, really? Yeah. And just be like, what does this mean? Actually, what am I actually experiencing and learning right now? Because we don't have to always take in that whole fear thing, but I will let Lisa finish
there's this like zooming out imagery that they're giving me of like you zoom out, but then all of a sudden you have this like height perspective and you kind of are dizzy and you're like, oh, I feel unsteady. And it creates this like, oh boy, fear. Oh my gosh, I feel unsteady. I'm really high up. And then you have to like settle.
Yeah.
But it's that like zooming out really fast that is very.
Yeah.
Your turn to say words.
I haven't read it back, so I don't know.
That's
like,
okay.
When it just comes out, it just okay. So this was from a guide. It was a pleading guide that came through, and it was regarding like what the frequencies that we create or that we bring forward for ourselves are. So it was almost like he's like, okay, all right, like simplify. Said, I bring forward the message to embody your frequency that is brought on by choice. So we talk about like, what do you want, right? When you want or desire something, it's as easy to just align your vision on that timeline and create it like it's a truth. Okay, so like literally, like I'm looking at the cup and being like, that is a white cup, instead of, and then being like, yeah, no, I 100% am in the process of starting my own business. It's gonna be it's mad awesome, right? And like, no, I'm in it. Like it is already started. And so that your timeline can then, because you're really seeing it as is right here. He said it's that easy to align your vision in that timeline. Humans tend to bring up the timeline or frequency they need to align the goal or desire, but it is the human thought that disconnects from desired frequency and puts us in one more dense frequency timeline, as that is the fear frequency. Much like a song that we tune into, we have infinite possibilities to tune into a song of choice. What do you want to listen to? We can train our energy so we don't replay or play out old fear frequencies that hold us in density. So essentially saying like it is, I'm starting a business, I'm in it, it's amazing, it's going so good, instead of all the things that could go wrong. Yeah, okay, good luck. Where are you getting the money for that? Okay, yeah, oh yeah, who's got the time for that? Right back into old frequency. It's like they're like, it is as easy. Like on that side, they don't necessarily understand. They do understand, but they don't get to the point where humans like really bump up against fear. Like, okay, we know that. It's as if you guys are experiencing this and it's as clear as day, literally, what do you want to focus on? Make that your current frequency, and what brings you out is fear. That is the instant density that'll bring you out of it. Because then all of a sudden, you're thinking in your head, yeah, that is a white cup, even though you're like, yeah, no, that's purple, right? Like it's not aligned then. So you could say, oh, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant. But in your head, you're like, but I have all these bills and I haven't paid it and we're so broke, blah, blah. Boom, right out of the frequency. It's like you can't think your way through timelines.
You have to like be or
it's
know
in
them.
Alignment. Yeah. It's actually in your like your core frequency alignment. It's the thoughts that be like, don't right out, because that moves your energy right out. That's like so and visual.
Sorry, go ahead.
So like resonance would bring you back always.
Right, because you're not going to reside in a frequency that doesn't align. Like if the frequency, it's so like if you're listening to Celine Dion and you're like, no, I want screamo music. And it's like, you're trying to, it doesn't match. Like it doesn't match. When you're sad and you want to cry or whatever, you're not going to put on like the hokey pokey if you want to cry. Unless that's like whatever. But it's like, it's as easy as that when they're like, when you're tuning into a certain sound. Okay. It's like, that's like the quantum field of timelines. If a timeline is an infinite amount of songs, it's not saying that they don't all exist. They all exist right now. Infinite amount of songs exist. It's the one that we choose to focus on and listen to that we're giving our attention to. Doesn't mean that all the other songs don't exist. It's just that we're not focusing on that song.
Yeah.
Because that's the song that we're choosing. So it's a really human example of this quantum field of timeline is what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting though. And it's kind of like this, not though, and this like as above, so below experience. So they're saying like fear pops you out of this resonance. And then all of a sudden you're in fear. When you think about your human experience of like, okay, I'm going to start this business and I'm so excited about it and la, 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 la. And you have this like building of energy, right? And you feel into it and you're da, da, da. And then all of a sudden your nervous system, your brain instantaneously is like, oh, thing, huh, and immediately you turn away from it. It's your nervous system and brain react in just as fast of a way. Like it's that mirroring of like what physiologically happens in your body. And so support yourself. Oh, okay, I notice something happened just now. A thought, a fear, a thing came in, popped me off of this energy, this resonance, this frequency, these thoughts that I've been building, this excitement, these choices of what I want. Fear comes in from external circumstance, from whatever, popped me out. Use that as your trigger point to be like, okay, I just got popped out of it. Nourish myself. What do I need?
Totally.
Like allow that to just move through you. When you do that, it becomes so much easier because then your brain and nervous system are like, great, you addressed the fear. There's actually nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to die right now. You're fine.
Yep.
Coming back to, okay, what do I want? And then you can rebuild into that frequency. It's like your body works in the exact same way as what they're saying, which I just think is so cool.
Totally. And that's what they said. Humans can train your energy so that you don't replay old fear frequencies.
And the more you take that process, the less your brain is going to have a shit fit every time something happens.
Totally.
You just don't get it triggered as much, right? 100%. You can shake it off quicker or it happens less and less.
Yeah.
I've noticed that progression even in my own life too, in my own reactions and stuff. Like I literally can say, yes, that is very true. Because I've noticed that. So cool. I love this. We got so much today. And I really was like,
we're on a roll.
Like, I don't know what to say about timelines, but we'll see. Like, how cool. Like, what beautiful information that came through. And so I really hope that anyone who's watching this that feels like this could help someone who's struggling with like, why am I feeling these things? Why am I feeling like I'm losing my mind. There are a lot of people that have been saying that statement to me from many walks of life, feeling like they're just out of touch with reality. And I really think it's because we're getting, for many, that macro view.
Definitely.
If you don't know that's happening, it's unnerving. So,
and here's a little tidbit too. They're just leaving me out. I think we talked about it, but just kind of like wrapping it up. If you have felt like you have worked so hard towards something and then all of a sudden you're like, what the heck just happened? Like, it feels like everything just shifted and like everything I thought was going just isn't, because of like either something somebody said or did or an action. Instead of like baby out with the bathwater, just maybe it's that thing that you need to clear up in that timeline so that you can come back into your highest frequency. So don't throw it all out at once. Just say, okay, oh, this is happening. I need to clear this up. I need to clear this up in this timeline so that I can get back into my highest frequency and keep on trucking.
Yeah.
No judgment.
I love it. All right. Any other statements? Yeah. Done. All right. Well, thank you. Problems. Yeah. Everything is good and easy now. Utopia.
Yeah, I hope I like call myself into the highest frequency timeline. Like, I am putting those goggles on. I'm seeing my world and my energy and my frequency in the highest timeline possible for myself right now. And I raise that frequency. That's my intention for today.
Okay. I need to wrap this up because the school's calling for my kids for some reason. So,
okay.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.